You know, what happens when a marriage completely falls apart? The divorce case gets dismissed, but one person is left in a terrible financial spot? Can a court still step in and order financial support? Well, back in 1993, the Indian Supreme Court tackled this exact question head-on in a landmark case, Jawaharlal Dhawan versus Jawaharlal Dhawan. And let me tell you, their decision drew a bright, clear line in matrimonial law that we still follow to this day.
Okay, let's just start right here. This single line from the court records, wow. It just cuts right to the bone, doesn't it? This was never just some dry, academic legal debate. It was a real human drama with unbelievably high stakes. You had a wife pleading for basic survival pitted against a very complex and frankly confusing legal system.
So, let's unpack this story. Our first section, A Millionaire's Wife Starving, really sets the stage by walking us through the long and winding legal road that finally brought Jawaharlal Dhawan to the nation's highest court.
And believe me, this legal battle was an absolute marathon. It all kicked off way back in 1985 with what was supposed to be a divorce by mutual consent. But Jawaharlal Dhawan later said her signature was obtained by fraud. That case gets dismissed in 1987 after a temporary truce, but they still lived apart. Then, just a few months later, the husband files a new divorce case in a totally different city, this time alleging adultery. So with that new case just dragging on, by 1990, a pretty desperate Jawaharlal Dhawan goes back to the original court in Amritsar and files for permanent alimony. But here's the big twist. In 1991, the High Court just strikes it down. They said her claim wasn't legally maintainable. It's this messy, complicated journey that ends up teeing up a huge, fundamental legal question.
And all of that legal back and forth, all those years in court, it really just leads us here, to Section 2, a crucial legal question. The whole thing, the entire complex history, it all boiled down to a single critical puzzle that only the Supreme Court could solve.
So here it is, the central issue. Can a court, using its powers under the Hindu Marriage Act, grant permanent financial support if it ends up dismissing the main divorce case? I mean, does the power to grant alimony exist all on its own, or is it fundamentally tied only to the act of actually dissolving or changing a marriage? That was the big question.
And the entire legal fight really hinged on how you read Section 25 of the Hindu Marriage Act. What's so wild is that this whole massive case turns on just a handful of words. The law says a court can order alimony at the time of passing any decree or at any time subsequent thereto. Okay, sounds simple enough, right? But what exactly does any decree mean? Does dismissing a case, does that count as passing a decree? That right there was the multi-million-dollar question.
This brings us right to Section 3, Justice versus the letter of the law. Because that central question, it set up a classic legal showdown, pitting two totally different ways of looking at the law against each other.
So on one side, you have the wife's plea for a more liberal, more practical view. Her lawyers argued, look, the whole point of this law is to provide relief. Forcing her to start a brand new, separate case for maintenance would just be cruel, create endless proceedings, and that a technicality shouldn't block her from getting the support she obviously needs. But then, on the other side, you have the husband's argument, which was very strict, very by the book. He said a decree under Section 25 means a specific thing, granting a divorce or separation. If the case is dismissed, the court's job is over. And crucially, he argued, hey, she's not without options. She should just use the other laws, like the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, which are specifically designed for this exact situation.
So the Supreme Court is faced with these two really compelling but completely contradictory arguments. And what they delivered was a judgment that was not only decisive, but it was also just brilliantly clear, all thanks to this one incredible metaphor. And that brings us to Section 4, the court's surgeon analogy.
This is just perfect. This one sentence explains the court's entire logic. Think about it. The surgeon is the matrimonial court. The operation is the act of changing the marriage. You know, divorce, separation. Post-operative care? That's permanent alimony. So the court is saying, look, if we don't perform the surgery, if we dismiss the case, then we can't prescribe the aftercare. The patient then has to go see her regular physician, which is the court's way of saying you got to use those other more appropriate legal avenues for support.
So let's just break down that thinking step by step. First, the court made it crystal clear that passing any decree under Section 25 means a decree that actually changes the marital status. A dismissal just doesn't do that. Second, it defined the matrimonial court's job as a very special one. Its job is to perform that surgery. If it doesn't operate, its role is finished.
And third, and this is so important, it wasn't leaving the wife high and dry. It was just clarifying that different legal problems need different legal tools. It was pointing her to the right physician, to the other laws that were designed precisely for her situation. This was all about making sure each law serves its proper purpose.
Which brings us to our final section, number 5, the verdict and its legacy. So, what happened to Chan Dhawan in the end, and why is this ruling from 1993 still so incredibly important today?
In the end, the Supreme Court sided with the High Court. Chan Dhawan's appeals were dismissed. The court ruled that her application for alimony under Section 25 just wasn't going to work. But, and this is the absolute key, the court explicitly went out of its way to say that her right to claim maintenance in other forums was totally preserved. It wasn't a no on her right to support. It was a no on the specific legal path she had taken to get it.
The impact of this case was huge, and it was immediate. As you can see here, the 1993 ruling established a very clear principle. Section 25 alimony is tied to a decree that actually alters the marriage. Now, look at how the law evolved after that. Later courts didn't throw this rule out. No, they built on it. In cases that involved void marriages, for instance, they cleverly expanded the definition of any decree to include a decree of nullity. This was a really smart evolution. It allowed courts to protect vulnerable people in those specific situations, while still keeping the core logic of Chan Dhawan completely intact.
So what's the big takeaway here? Why are we still talking about this case 30 years later? Well, it provides this essential clarity in the law. It makes sure lawyers and their clients know exactly which legal door they need to knock on. This prevents people from forum shopping, and it makes sure that our different maintenance laws each serve their own distinct purpose. For the legal system as a whole, this kind of procedural discipline is absolutely vital. It creates predictability, it creates fairness, and it ensures that while justice is always the goal, it's pursued through a clear and orderly process. This ruling is a pillar of that discipline.
And that's really the powerful question this case leaves us with. I mean, Chan Dhawan's situation was deeply sympathetic. You couldn't help but feel for her. And yet, the court chose to hold the line, to uphold the strict structure of the law. It believed that in the long run, clear rules and separate jurisdictions actually serve justice best, even if it might seem a little harsh in one person's case. It's this profound debate about the balance between judicial compassion and procedural integrity, a tension that's still right at the heart of legal systems all over the world.